Hello everyone, this is Brian Lagunas. I'm going to be one of your presenters today on what's new for .NET developers in the NetAdvantage 13.1 XAML controls. We're going to be covering the WPF and Silverlight controls. I'm the product manager for the line of business controls. You can email me at blagunas@infragistics.com. Follow me on Twitter at Brian Lagunas. Seems we're having audio issues. Test, test. Hello? Can everyone hear me? Okay. Just for those people who didn't get my audio, I'll go again. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on what's new for .NET developers in NetAdvantage 13.1 or XAML controls. So that's going to be covering our WPF and Silverlight controls. My name is Brian Lagunas. I'm the product manager for the line of business controls. You can email me at blagunas@infragistics.com. Follow me on Twitter at Brian Lagunas, and I blog at brianlagunas.com. Joining me today in this webinar will be Nick Landry. He is a product manager for all our data visualization controls. You can email him at activenick@infragistics.com. Follow him on Twitter at activenick, and he blogs at activenick.net. Today we're going to be talking about our new features and new controls that we've released for our line of business and data visualization controls for WPF and Silverlight. We have a lot to talk about, a little bit of time, so we're just going to go ahead and get right to it. For Q&A, since there's two sections to this webinar, when I finish, I'll take up questions. I'll be answering questions through the chat window or the question window when my session is over, while Nick would be talking about data visualization controls. So first one I want to start off with today is MVVM support for our XAML menu item. Now, if you're doing XAML development, most likely you are doing MVVM, model view model development. What that means is you have a view model where all your business logic exists, and then you are data binding properties and elements from that view model to your view. Well, in the past, our XAML menu item, which deals with our XAML menu and our XAML context menu, didn't have support for a command property. Well, I'm happy to say that now we have added support for iCommand, so we provide the command property, command parameter, and the command target. So let's look at a little demo of how you would implement this feature. I have an application here, very simple. It's an MVVM application. Here I have my main view. This view is nothing more than a text block whose text property is bound to a message that exists on my view model, which we'll look at in a minute. Then I've attached a context menu, and this context menu has a single menu item on it called Click Me, which is data bound to a command that exists in my view model called Click Command. I'm also passing a command parameter to my execute and can't execute handlers. Okay. So let's take a quick look at the view model. Of course, any view model must implement iNotify property change. Here's the definition for our message property. We're just initializing it to loaded. We have defined our iCommand click command. And if you're familiar with MVVM, there's a term out there for what's called a relay command, also known as a delegate command. And what this does is allows you to provide a delegate method in place of implementing a custom class for the execute and can't execute of the iCommand implementation. So I'm using a simple relay command implementation to provide my delegate methods here, click and can click. By default, I'm just returning true on can click, and then click, I'm just setting the message to command executed at date time now. So there's my view model. Let's take a quick look at the code behind on our view. I'm just doing a very simple wire up. I'm just setting the data context to a new instance of our main view model. Okay. Now, here's a trick that most people get in MVVM with context menus. context menus are not part of the visual tree. Therefore, you have to set their data context when they become part of that tree, when they become part of the overall visual tree. So the easiest way to do that is to handle the context menu opening event and just set the data context to the view's data context. So we're taking the sender, which in this case is the context menu, and setting its data context to the same data context. There's other ways to do this, but that was quick and dirty. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll see it in action. So here's our text box. Now I right-click to get my context menu. I'm going to hit Click Me. The Can Execute will be checked, which will be true. And then once the click occurs, my command will be invoked. And then the message is updated. Right? Awesome. We've been waiting for that one for a long time. We finally got it in there. Makes our lives a whole lot easier. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is our XAML syntax editor. This is becoming a quite popular control. Basically, our XAML syntax editor is a Visual Studio-like IDE for syntax highlighting, for grammar rules, error checking, and things like that. Okay, so our editor has now got a new ruler margin. So by setting a single property on our ruler, on the XAML syntax editor, you can show and hide this ruler margin. And you can also customize how this ruler margin looks. You know, you can change the background color, the tick colors, you know, the number colors, things like that. So when you're editing a lot of big documents, it may be useful to show hidden formatting symbols so you can clearly see spaces and tabs and other white space characters. So we've added a property that allows you to show the visible white space within the editor. This is also available in Visual Studio if you use it inside of Visual Studio. Also, when editing large documents or navigating a large document, it can sometimes be difficult to track the line that you're currently editing. So what we did was added the current line highlight feature. Once again, this is available and very familiar if you use Visual Studio. It basically highlights the line that your cursor's at currently. Okay, and you can customize the background color, the borders. You can customize how it looks to fit your needs. Now, another feature that the XAML syntax editor got that we're really excited about is language support for T-SQL. This was a highly requested feature, and if you're doing any type of ad hoc SQL statements, or if you're storing SQL statements inside of the database, maybe you're using in Hibernate and you're dynamically creating SQL statements or anything like that, you can load into or from the database. We now support over 26 different SQL statements, so we can handle the most commonly used SQL statements in your application. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the sample browser that ships with the 13.1 release. This sample browser is going to have all the controls and most of the features that we're going to demonstrate today. Right now, let's look at the syntax editor and see how easy it is to modify, you know, the ruler margin, white space, things like that. So in this particular example, we're looking at the ruler margin. And like I said, a single property turns the ruler margin on and off. If I split my view, my split view will also get the ruler margin. Okay, you can change background colors, border colors. You get the idea. You know, your tick mark, caret, text color, things like that. Now, for the other customizations, to demonstrate those are actually in the editor customizations node. So we're going to click on that node. You can see how we can have white space highlighting. We can change the color of the white space highlighting. We can get current line highlighting. So when I click around on the editor, I know what line my cursor is currently at. And of course, you can change the highlighted background color, or you can change the border to fit your needs. Now, to demonstrate the T-SQL, we're basically going to click on the Load External File. I'm going to select the Transact SQL file language. I'm going to open a file. And I already have a little test SQL here, so we can open it up. I'm going to open that up, and as you can see, all my SQL keywords are highlighted as I would expect them to be, as if I were working inside of SQL Server Visual Studio Manager, right? So it's very similar to that experience. There is no IntelliSense yet, so if you're going to start asking questions about IntelliSense, we don't have that yet, but we are going to get that eventually. The next feature I want to cover is our XAML Gantt control. Now, this is another control that's becoming very popular, and one of the most popular features about our XAML Gantt control was that you can load Microsoft project data, right? So if you were inside Microsoft Project and you had a project you wanted to import, you simply just take that XML file and you open it directly within our XAML Gantt, and you can now visualize the entire project within the XAML Gantt control. Well, now we provide you the ability to save a project from the XAML Gantt out to the Microsoft Project 2010 format. Now, keep in mind, this does not assume round tripping, meaning if I were to load the Microsoft Project file into the XAML Gantt, make changes, and then save, the file actually gets overwritten. Okay, so we're not round tripping, and the main reason for this is because there's some things that we don't support that Microsoft does, such as support task types or per task and resource calendars, WBS outline codes, empty rows, time phase data, things like that. So if you bring Microsoft project data into the XAML Gantt and there are elements in there that we don't support, that data will be lost when you save and overwrite the file. Now, if you're just working within the XAML Gantt exclusively, you don't have to worry about that. Our XAML Pivot Grid also got a little bit of love on this release. One of the biggest feedbacks we had with this is, once you load this pivot grid and you select your database, you have your cube, you have all your measured groups, you're starting to drill down, you have filters applied, you have sorts applied, right? You have all this state that takes some time to drill into, and once you leave the controller, leave the page, you navigate away and you come back, you got to do it all over again. Well, we've added a method called Save Customizations that basically allows you to save the state, serialize the state of the XAML Pivot Grid out to disk, so when you come back to it, you can use the Load Customizations method to load those previously saved customizations. And those customizations can be either loaded from a string or from a stream. So we give you a couple options on how you want to handle that serialization. Now, another really big popular feature that we got was for the WPF ribbon, the XAML ribbon control. It's the Microsoft Office Application Menu 2010, also known as the Backstage. So if you've ever used Microsoft Office, Outlook, Office 2010, Excel, you know what the Backstage is, right? The Silverlight version, because we have two different versions of the ribbon. We have a Silverlight version and we have a WPF version. The Silverlight versions had this for a while. So the WPF ribbon is just now getting it. So let's go ahead and take a look just so we know exactly what we're talking about. I'm just going to go to our sample browser, which when you install 13.1, you're going to have this. I'm going to go to the Application Menu 2010. Okay, so the XAML ribbon has tools and buttons and other elements that allow you to do something to a view. Okay, what the Backstage does is it provides you a mechanism or menu items that allow you to do something on a view or to the overall application. Right. So in this case, I'm clicking on Info. I can see information about the view, or recent, and you can have access to recent documents or recent places. This is very common. New. Give options to create new types of documents. Right, so this area here that the available templates is contained within is actually a content control. So you can put anything you want inside of this. And with our sample browser, you also can look at the XAML code that was used to run the application, right, to make that application. So if we look down here, we can see all the application menu items. We can see the separator. We can see how we're setting the content. Right, so, and of course, if you didn't want to read all that, you have the snippet, and of course, any code behind that may be available. Okay, so there's one more control that I want to tell you guys about. It's not available right now. I can't even get a screenshot of it, but we are building a new rich text editor control. It's called the XAML Rich Text Editor. It's going to be releasing in CTP in about a week. I'm really hoping to have this released to you guys in about a week. And basically, it's going to replace Microsoft Word. Okay, it's going to be a Microsoft Word type editor. We're going to support different exporting and importing of different languages such as RTF, plain text, XML, HTML, Word, right? So all these languages support are coming. The CTP should be coming out. Like I said, I'm hoping in about a week. Hopefully not too much longer than that. I really want to get this in your guys' hands and have you guys playing with it. But basically, this is going to be a Word type control where you can edit and manipulate rich text, have tables, images, bolding, highlighting, all the different font sizes and font types, things like that. So keep an eye out for that. That wraps it up for the line of business controls, the features we got for line of business. Now I'm going to hand it off to Nick Landry, who's going to blow your mind with all the cool data visualization stuff we have. So Nick, you want to go ahead and take it?
Yeah, I'm here, so you can hear me fine?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So I've got the slide is up. Everybody can follow here. Okay, great. So thank you very much, Brian. That was a really good overview of some of the cool new features that we've added to our Silverlight and WPF controls in 13.1 for the line of business side of things. So as Brian said at the beginning, my name is Nick Landry, for those that joined a little late. My name is Nick Landry. I'm a senior product manager here at Infragistics, and I manage all of our mobile controls, but I also manage all of our data visualization controls. So today I've got my data visualization hat on to tell you about all the great new features and controls that we've added in our data visualization suite as part of WPF and Silverlight in release 13.1. Just a reminder also, a year ago we consolidated our WPF and Silverlight controls. We used to have a separate package for XAML controls line of business, well, WPF controls line of business and WPF controls data visualization. Same thing for Silverlight. So now, as of a year ago, if you own the WPF product, then you get all of the WPF controls, including the DV controls. So that means the same thing goes for Silverlight. So if you own the individual WPF package, you get everything that you see here today. If you own the individual Silverlight package, you get the same thing that Brian's been talking about, except the WPF ribbon, which is a new feature of WPF. If you own the .NET package, the .NET bundle, NetAdvantage for .NET, then you get everything that is discussed here in this webinar. And the same thing goes, of course, if you own our Ultimate bundle, which has pretty much everything. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, of course, data visualization, the granddaddy of all controls is always the chart. So we have the best, most powerful, most versatile, and the fastest data chart on the market when it comes to pretty much every platform. But today we're going to talk specifically about the XAML platform. So this is just a quick recap of our XAML data chart if you've never had a chance to play with it. It supports over 40 chart types. There's a lot of different series that are supported. You can do composite charting, and you have things like legends, built-in markers, trend lines. If you do financial charting, we have full financial indicators, a time navigator. You can even do things like financial overlays, like Bollinger Bands, price channel overlays, and things like that. It's fully stylable. It's very powerful. Supports gradients, animated transitions, and all. So what did we do in our data chart for this release? Well, there's two very powerful features that we've added to the best data chart that basically got better. So the first one is the high-density scatter series is now a full feature in the product. So about a year ago, we introduced this as a CTP feature, or what we call a preview feature. And the high-density scatter series, the goal is to basically allow you to plot literally hundreds of thousands or even millions of data points in real time on a data chart. So if you have like an insane number of points and you need to be able to zoom in, zoom out, navigate through those and do updates, this is the one for you. The way that it works, this series, is that we've basically sacrificed a few of the versatility features. So for example, every marker normally on a chart can actually be a full XAML element. So you could put pie charts basically as markers if you wanted. Whereas with the high density scatter series, all you can put are actually points. The point could be 1 pixel, it could be 2 by 2 or 3 by 3 or 4 by 4, so you can control the size of those pixels. And every one of those points, of course, you can interact with it. So you can hover over it. I have a demo actually I'm going to show you in a few slides. And you can actually interact with them so that those points are actually live, and you can click on them and get events or get tooltips and stuff like that. But it basically is a great way to visualize data, and you can even control things like the density of information to see where you have a higher density of point or a lower density by changing colors. So it creates a kind of a bit of a heat map in a way. We, of course, always do ongoing performance optimization. So as customers play with our grid, work with it, integrate it in their applications, sorry, not our grid, our chart, we always discover these fringe scenarios sometimes that people encounter that they try things we didn't think of before or they're not used very commonly. So we always try to tweak the chart to make sure that it can respond better in those fringe scenarios. So we've done more performance optimizations here as well. The next feature that I'm going to demo as well for the chart is what we call the hover interactions. So it's a bit of a misnomer because it's not necessarily just about hover. It's all those interactions whenever you move your mouse over a chart and you want to have some kind of interaction, whether it's highlighting a bar, or maybe it is displaying a tooltip for a data point, or maybe it's actually showing crosshairs on a chart. So these are all features that we had before, but some of them were not possible. Others required a little bit more of application code. So we made things a lot easier and also a lot more powerful. So it's fully animated. You can snap the data points. You can use interpolation. I'm going to show it to you live because this is the kind of demo that you basically have to see it to really understand what it does. So I'm going to switch gears to the WPF samples browser. All of this, of course, works just as well in the Silverlight version. So whether you use one version of XAML or the other, that's not a problem. Okay, so I'm going to go down here now to the data chart, so the XAML data chart. And what the first demo that I'm going to show you is the high density scatter series. You'll note when I click on it, it loads a lot of data because it's actually generating just shy of 1 million data points on this one. And the way that it works is, as you can see, as I move my mouse cursor around, all of these points actually have data on them. So I can return the XY value for each of those points. You can also see right here, there's a few areas that are a little more deeper in color because there's a higher density of points there. So you can actually configure how you want those more dense areas to be displayed, or if you want to have more of a deeper red cloud and what the threshold is in terms of showing the differences in colors on the chart. And in order to create something like this, it's actually quite simple. You simply create a data chart, and this is the series that's part of the data chart. So if you've never used the data chart, it works as you configure the data chart itself, and then after that you add one or more series to the data chart. So we have support for about 40 different types of series. The high density scatter series is one of those. So you can basically bind your x-axis to some numeric data, the y-axis to some numeric data. In the code behind here, most of the information here is just to randomly generate this data that's being created. Is basically just creating some random values to create a big cloud of data. And as you can see here, we are plotting 950,000 data points on this chart. So I don't know why we didn't go for the full million. We've tested it. We've actually tested scenarios up to 5 million easily. And you set the item source, and then you simply express what is the X member path and Y member path. These are things that are going to be used after that for the tooltip down here. And then you can set the resolution as well. The resolution will affect how those points are going to be rendered in dense areas. So it's actually very simple to use. It's very powerful. And as you can see, we have the ability to hover. And then I can also zoom in, and I can even drag that chart around. So right now I'm actually using the zoom drag. But if I use the shift key, I can actually pan around, and you can see that I can navigate around my cloud, and it's actually very fast. So all of these are actual live points. So that's our high density scatter series. If you have a lot of points to show, this is the one. You can have sometimes as many points as possible where it's actually going to create a curve on screen whenever it's zoomed out. Another really awesome feature that you have to see to believe is all the editing features in the hover interactions. So imagine if you have, for example, a chart like this that has two series. It's got a bar chart, a bar series, and it also has a line series with different markers. So when you hover over them, you can actually get a nice highlight over the bar like this, where you see it basically animates in the background. It scrolls. So now there's a bit of a delay. So as I move, there's a certain speed at which this moves. Let's say you want it to be a little more snappy. You can actually control things, for example, like the transition duration. If you've ever used our motion framework, you know that everything is controlled by the transition duration. So if I move the transition duration to 0, then the bar is actually fully live as I hover over different things. Okay, the next one is the highlight layer like this. So you can see now I have a line chart, a line series, and the bar again. But now I also have a marker that follows the line series in between. So I'm going to lower transition duration on this one, and you'll see that as I move, of course, the marker is not transitioning because I'm not using interpolation. This is a category series, which means there's only points on each bar. If I want to use interpolation, it means it's going to try to calculate what is the intermediate value of the line series for those values that are in between my data points. If I use interpolation, now you'll notice my marker is actually following that line, and it actually shows directly where I am. And of course, you can tie tooltips to this. These are just individual samples. You'll see the whole thing coming together very soon. For the tooltip side of things, it's basically the same behavior. So you have a tooltip right there at the top that basically changes values as I go from one column to another. So it shows what is the value on the bar, what is the value with the line series itself. Again, I can turn on interpolation. I can even change the tooltip position to say inside end. So now the tooltip is inside of the surface area for the chart. And now you'll see the tooltip actually follows exactly where I am. And I can get a more snappy result if I turn off the transition duration, where now my tooltip just follows very well. I don't know how all of these great animations are translating on the over the webinar software, but you can play with all of these things using a sample browser online with Silverlight, or by installing the product and playing with the WPF sample browser by running it on your machine. You can also move the tooltips if you want inside at the start, so they would show up at the bottom like this. Now, another type of layer you can add. So we've seen highlights, we've seen tooltips. Now, the next one you might want is actually crosshairs. So crosshairs are basically snapping, in this case, to actual values. So one crosshair is snapping to the top of each bar, and another one is snapping to each point on the line series. Again, I can turn off transition duration, use interpolation, and now I have a crosshair that perfectly follows exactly the intersection I have. Of course, the interpolation makes a little less sense on the bar series here, so what you can always do is simply turn it on for one but not for the other. And then you have the tooltips, again, so we've already demonstrated some of the tooltips, where you can have now tooltips moving around like this. So the item tooltip layer, so there's the category tooltip we saw before, now this is the item tooltip layer. It allows you to snap the tooltip directly to the data point itself. So for example, again, it's animating using the data transition, and I'll lower that transition down, I'll use interpolation, and now I have tooltips that are snapping exactly to my position where I have all these values. Again, the interpolation shows in between values for the category series. It's a little less meaningful. It's usually better when you turn that on an actual line series. Finally, to put all of these things together, you can go, for example, in multiple layers. I'll go straight to the final result here, where I'll turn off transition duration, use interpolation, and now you see I have crosshairs that are matching exactly where I am on each series. I have the highlight for the bar, and I have tooltips that are moving. So this is pretty awesome, because it really allows you to go in, dive into a chart, and see exactly the values as they are. Same thing here. You can even do synchronized layers, where you can have more than one chart. I'll just minimize this here at the top. You can have more than one chart, and now the two charts are actually synchronized. So as I change my mouse cursor from one to the other, then it changes from one series to another, and horizontally, the crosshair is showing me exactly where I am when I'm intersecting with an actual line series. So all of these are called what we call the hover interactions. It basically comes through a combination of highlights, item tooltips, category tooltips and crosshairs, and you can sync everything together to create some really awesome interactions. So you gotta play with this because I think it's one of the more visually powerful features, and I think your users will love it in the applications that you build. So let's go back to our slide deck. Next, we have our beloved pie chart. So the pie chart is definitely a staple of virtually every dashboard. It's a great way to show different statistics where things sum up to 100%. We added one very simple feature on the pie chart is for those that are already using pie charts today but simply want to have a hole in the middle. So kind of turning it into a donut chart. We also have a donut chart, and I'll show that to you. But first of all, we introduced the inner extent property on the pie chart. So the moment you set the inner extent, you can then have a central hole inside of it. You can have a small hole, a bigger hole, depending on how hungry you are with your donut. But in that case, it's simply going to turn a pie into what we would call a single series donut. If you want to do more advanced kinds of donut, well, we got a new donut chart. So it's a new control that we're introducing in 13.1. So the way it works is the donut can be used as a single series, like you can see here in the image on the left. There's virtually no difference between a single series donut chart or a pie chart with a hole. Even then, you can even take a single series donut chart, drop the inner radius to 0, and then it's going to look virtually like a pie chart. Where the donut chart really shines, though, is when you have multiple series of data to show, like the image on the right here. So when you have multiple series, you have two types of scenarios that are enabled by this. First of all, it could be just separate data series that are not necessarily related. So you simply bind each series to a collection via the item source property, or in the case of the real donut charts that are sought after most often, is what we call a multi-level rings, where it actually shows a hierarchy. So for example, here on the right, you see the marketing department has strategic and operational. These are the sub-layers. So it allows you to kind of drill into your data whenever you have a hierarchy. This is still a preview feature. We wanted to wrap it up for 13.1, but unfortunately, we just couldn't get it up and running. It was originally scheduled for this fall, but we managed to get a preview out to make sure that we can get some feedback from you, see how you like the feature, and we can then tweak it. And this is something we're going to release final in this fall in 13.2. But you can already play with it today as a CPP feature. Just know that it may not have gotten all the testing that it deserves yet. So you can configure the inner radius. You've got things like the pie chart. You can do slice and section labeling. You can just do selections, explosions. Explosions don't work when you have multiple series, though, because otherwise it's just a weird behavior. Explosions only work when you have one single series. And you also have the other category. So let's say you have a lot of tiny, tiny little slices. Then you can say, well, you know what? For everything that is under 10%, just group them all together into a category that's going to be called others. So, and you can set that threshold to see exactly how it's going to show up in that. We got legend, of course, the styling and themes. So let me just give you a quick demo of this in the sample browser. So the pie chart is pretty much self-explanatory. The donut chart right here, it's right here at the top. So this is the base donut chart. It has the same behavior with only one series as a pie chart. So if I take the inner extent, I can make it bigger. Or if I reduce it to 0, then you get a pie chart. Just like you can take that inner extent on a pie chart control, move it up, and then get a hole that's going to show up in the middle. And then you can change the radius factor, of course, for the entire control. You can say how you want those labels to show in the middle. So it can be either at the center, inside end, or outside end with little lines like this. You can even change the label extent if you want to affect how it's going to be displayed. I'm going to lower the radius factor, make sure that it displays a little nicer. And you can also change the rotation angle depending on which category you want to show up first. And you'll see those labels get re-optimized by moving left and right so that it all looks good. The hierarchical series, that's the CTP feature. You can see it right here. It gives you an example. For example, between development could have research and QA, and in customer support could have multiple groups. And then using best fit, sometimes the label is going to be inside, sometimes the label is going to be outside. So that's one of the beauties of this donut chart, is that you don't have to decide these things always ahead of time, because depending on the size of the slices, it's better to let the donut chart figure out how to display all of this. And then multiple rings. This is the other way of doing multiple rings where there's not really a relationship in a hierarchy. These are a little harder to read sometimes because you can see actual information tied to both. But it's up to you to make sure that the data makes sense because there's not going to be any relationship between the two. And then, of course, you can do selection and explosion. So if you have a single series, you can select a slice. And as you can see at the top there, you can even detect what is being selected. So in terms of a code snippet, this is actually very simple. You create the donut chart. You say what is the slide click event, or where is it going to go, the data context for it, and then you can set a bunch of different properties like the name, whenever it gets loaded, what the launch, what the item source is, label member path, and then you can say label's position is best fit. So you can change all of these either in XAML, or you can change some of these things in the code behind if you want. I'm going to move a little faster here because we still have a bunch of content, and I want to make sure we can answer some questions. I know Brian is answering some questions right now about some of the material that he covered. Regarding the material that I'm covering, I'm going to be answering those questions at the end. Okay, and then we have the another control that we did a tiny little feature in there, but it's still very useful, is again in our data visualization suite, we have the tree map. So tree map is actually a very powerful data visualization tool because they basically allow you to show relative weighing of data points. And if you have one or more levels in those data points, you can use all sorts of algorithms like sift, squarified, slice, and dice that are built in. So that every one of those levels, you can click on them and you can go and drill in to see another level below. The one feature that we've added here is regarding tooltips. So you might say, like, wait a minute, we could do tooltips before. But the thing is, the tooltips, the way it was built before, was actually requiring a lot of application built to do it. Now, what we've done is we've introduced the tooltip style, tooltip content template, and the tooltip member path properties directly baked into the control so that you're going to have to basically write less code to get that feature enabled. That's usually my motto is less code, more cowbell. I want to make sure that you guys have to write less code to get more power out of our controls, and that's basically what we strive for. So I could show you a demo of the tree map. Let me just go back to the WPF browser here. So if I go down to the tree map, there's a tree map right here, which was updated. So in the display section, you'll see we have a new tooltip sample included here, so that you can basically hover over different items, and basically we'll show you a tooltip. Especially when you start having some small categories like this, whenever you it becomes hard to see. That's where the tooltips are really good. And of course, you can have some click interactions. This one is not clickable right now, but it shows you how you can see tooltips on all of those. And you can have different features, of course, that are supported in here. So you can have data filtering if you want on it. So you can say, I want to see electricity production, internet users. So you see highlights. So that's where the tooltip, again, is very useful. So that's where the tree map comes in. So when you create data visualization dashboards, tree map alongside with the maps, the charts, the pie charts, gauges, bullet graphs, they're all the staples that you need to create advanced BI dashboards. Okay. Now let's switch gears to the geographic map control. And so geographic map is actually one of our star controls that we've been working a lot on over the last year or so. We've introduced a lot of new features over the last year, especially in this release in 13.1. And this is both for the WPF and Silverlight versions, of course. Again, this is part of NetAdvantage. So just to give you a quick overview of our geographic map controls, we actually have that control available on other platforms. It's also available on our web product, HTML5 and jQuery, which is Ignite UI. It's also available in the WinJS side of NetAdvantage for Windows UI. And we're also working to bring that map control to more platforms, like the XAML side of WinRT, Windows Phone, even our iOS controls like Nucleus. I have actually a webinar today at 1 p.m. in about an hour and a half on Nucleus if you're interested. And then also our jQuery mobile controls in Ignite UI. The way that our map controls work is you basically have support for multiple imagery providers. And remember that map controls are not just for GIS developers, so people that do geographic information systems. Any kind of dashboard can benefit from a map because there's a statistic that runs around in GIS circles that says that about 70 to 80% of all data has a geospatial component attached to it. So whenever you have any kind of data that has an address, a location, a direction, a route, remember that the best place to put this kind of information is on a map. It's not in a chart, it's not in a grid. I know you guys love your grids, and that's great. You love you for it because I know you love our grids. But sometimes the information fits a little better on a map than in a grid. So you have all of these controls available if you use Silverlight and WPF. And in terms of the imagery, you can actually use free imagery like OpenStreetMap, and there's even some free tile sets available in Esri. And you can also use paid imagery like Big Maps or the higher-end Esri tile sets in CloudMate. It's a very productive control. It easily allows you to integrate this inside of your desktop GIS applications, especially since most map controls, if you look, for example, at Google Maps or Bing Maps, most of the map controls are all for web developers, so they can be integrated in browsers. This is the best map control you can get to integrate into a Silverlight or a WPF application. You can data mine all of your information in there. You simply set the item source on each of the series, and all you have to do is say which of the objects that you're binding to has a latitude property, which property is the longitude, and then automatically it binds the data directly on a map. It gives you very advanced mapping feature that normally you would only get inside of a paid product, but you can even do it with free tile sets like OpenStreetMap. And the beauty is that if you're still testing the waters around map usage in your applications, you can get started with something like free imagery like OpenStreetMap, and eventually, if you switch to a premium provider like Bing Maps or Esri, then you won't have to rebuild your application because if you're using our map control, you're already up and running. You simply need to change the imagery provider in the background, but you don't have to rebuild the application. So it's a very powerful scenario if you're scaling up, starting small and then scaling up in your usage of maps inside of your application. You can combine things like client-side data layers in RMAP with server-side tiles like the ones provided by Esri. And you can also combine multiple imagery layers with cutouts to do composite maps, and everything is animated, and I have some cool demos I'm going to show you for this. So these are just some examples of scenarios you can implement with our map control. It could be like proportional symbol data. For example, like on the left here, we have a map of earthquakes in the Asia-Pacific region. It could be weather data maps. All of the contour line series here can also be used for elevation maps, or it could also be flight pattern maps, for example, like this demo. I'm going to show you the live version of it. These are all the built-in geographic data series that we have in here. So all of these features were basically already there. So there's nothing new in this. It's just a lot of people are not familiar with our maps. So I want to make sure to bring you up to speed on it. So you can put scatter data with a symbol series. You have the proportional symbol, which has the scattered data. It's like bubble series, but on a map. The geographic shape allows you to load shape files like standard Esri shape files that we even provide with the control. So you can see shape of countries, of counties, or continents. The geographic shape control series allows you, it's a little more like the shape series, but each shape acts more like a control. So you can set more events on it, highlights, and more interactions. There's a polyline, which can be used as simple as just creating a route or a territory or a polygon, or it could be an entire roadmap. And then you have the contour line and the scatter. They kind of work the same way. They're all about triangulated data. One of them creates a cloud with densities. The other one creates contour lines. And then finally, we have that geographic, that high-density scatter series I talked about that can plot like millions of locations of data points, where we have the equivalent on a map where you can see everything. And I'm going to show you a very cool demo of all this because maps really have to be played with because they're such a visual tool. I've mentioned Esri so far, and for those of you that are not familiar, so Infragistics is actually now an Esri partner. So we've partnered with Esri. They're the world leader in GIS products and technologies. They have over 1/3 of the global GIS market share, and there's over 300,000 organizations that make use of their technologies, whether it's hardware, software, maps. 70% of all GIS users actually make use in one way, shape, or form of Esri products. and they have a very strong presence also in the government space. So if we have some government folks watching the webinar right now, I'm sure you've probably heard of Esri or seen it in use in different software systems. So our maps actually support, our map control supports Esri imagery now. So they specialize on the mapping side of things. So whether it's map imagery, map data, spatial data, GIS services, these are all things provided by Esri. But maps are all good, but you're not going to build an application with just a map. I mean, sooner or later, you're going to need additional menus, buttons, grids, charts, a full dashboard, and this is where Infragistics comes into play. We have the rest of the DV story, so we go beyond just maps. We also have the chart, the pie chart, the donuts, all sorts of gauges, bullet graphs. Actually, it's supposed to be radial gauges and linear gauges here. We have spark lines, tree maps, funnels, Gantt, pivot grids, everything that's used in DV. So we have a complementary story with Esri where they provide awesome map services and imagery, and then we can host all of that in our map control combined with the rest of our controls to create really advanced BI applications with geospatial access in them. So our geographic map control for Silverlight and WPF now supports Esri ArcGIS maps. ArcGIS is Esri's property that is either available in the cloud via ArcGIS Online or via dedicated servers with ArcGIS Server. Even if you don't have an Esri account or anything, you can still make use of some of those maps because there's a bunch of public tile sets that are available, and I'm going to show you some demos on how this is done and how you can easily leverage this in your application. So what are some of the new features we've added in 13.1 for the geographic map? So first of all, there's the proportional symbol series, that bubble series on the map. That was a CTP feature. It was a preview feature we introduced in 2012. It's now final. It's here to stay, and it's solid. You can play with it. We have the geographic tile series, which allows you to have more than one layer of tile sets. So you can basically have, for example, a big maps layer on top of an OpenStreetMap layer. And you can either use cutouts or transparencies to differentiate between the two. The high-density geographic scatter series is still in preview, but it's an updated preview. It's a very complex layer. We haven't had a chance to fully finish the testing on it, but we wanted to make sure that those that are playing with it get a more stable version, a faster version. So it's an updated CTP that comes in 13.1. Aside from that, we have the support for multiple layers. As I said, we have the geographic tile series. We have the support for Esri ArcGIS, all of the 256 by 256 Mercator tiles. So the Mercator is the projection where the Earth, which is round, is basically projected into like a cylinder that lays flat. So that's why, for example, Antarctica always looks so big on maps, because it's kind of small at the bottom of the Earth, but when you lay it out on a cylinder and then lay it flat on the table, it looks much bigger than it actually is because of the Mercator projection. That's the same projection that is used in Bing Maps, in Google Maps, in MapQuest, in all of the typical consumer and enterprise maps that most people are using. And then before, if you wanted to use some of our imagery providers, especially, for example, Bing Maps, you had to write a fair bit of application code. We've simplified a lot of this. Again, as I said, less code, more cowbell. Making sure that you write less code. So now, using Bing Maps is it's much easier. You simply set the provider, set the type of tile you want to use, like road, imagery, satellite, provide your Bing Maps key, and you're done. And we have a new Geographic Map Browser that I'm going to demo for you, and that's going to be the main part of my demo here. The Geographic Map Browser is live today. So if you want to play with it, it's actually, you go to http://labsinfragistics.com/silverlightdv showcases map browser. It's a very powerful sample. It comes with full source code, so when you install the product, you get all the source code for it. And it allows you to play with the different layers. It shows you how to bind data. So it's not just a little technical sample that shows one feature at a time. It groups a lot of features together into more of a mapping solution that really shows the power of our geographic map control. You got over 55 different tile layers that are built into that browser. You got navigation pane, pan and zoom controls. You can see the latitude and longitude of mouse cursor and everything. So I'm going to show that to you live instead of talking to you on a slide. So let's jump into the geographic map demo. First, we have a couple demos in the samples browser. So if you go to XAML Geographic Map here, we have, for example, in display, We have our proportional symbol series right here. Right now, this is actually using OpenStreetData, where you see all those different bubbles. And then as I zoom in, I can actually see all those bubbles showing me different densities. So it could be the size of the bubble, the color that can show data. The geographic tile series, for example, right here, shows you how we have one layer of imagery, which is OpenStreetMap in the background, and then you've got Bing Maps data being shown on top of it. And just to show you how that works, I'm going to change the bounds of the, I'm going to say I want to see a custom region, for example, just North America. So you see right here, I've got a rectangle where I have one layer of imagery that shows the whole world, and then another layer of imagery showing satellite data with Bing Maps. So the cutout between the two is actually perfect because both map layers are on the same data. And you can also have actual shape files that act as the delimiters for this. And there's also the high density series that I'm going to show you on the map browser. So, but let me close this for now. Actually, I'll keep it open because I have another demo after this. What I want to show you now is in our Geographic Map Browser. So right here what we have, I'll put it full screen, F11, yeah. This is our Geographic Map Browser. This is a Silverlight version that's running. We don't have a WPF version of that demo yet. All the capabilities here are possible in WPF. It's just that we've only created it in Silverlight for now, so you can easily access it from our website. So you get these panels. So you see when I move my mouse, I can see the coordinates of where I am on Earth. And then the way it works is that we have a base map layer, and then you choose which imagery you want as your base map layer. So it could be OpenStreetMaps, or then you can see a preview of each here. So it could be a Bing Map styles, satellite imagery, Bing Maps, hybrid, or rather just pure satellite with no labels. Of course, to use Bing Maps and CloudMade, you're going to need to have a key. So when you first run the browser on your own machine, if you don't see any values for Bing Maps and CloudMade in here, that means you don't have a key for it. You just go to bingmapsportal.com. You can get a key there. There's all sorts of provisions for, so if you're building nonprofit applications or mobile applications, or if you're just doing an evaluation, you can get a free key for this, so you don't necessarily have to pay it first. Okay, so satellite, and then you have all these great Esri maps that are available, like the World Topographical Map, World Imagery Map, World Oceans Map. So there's a lot of different Esri maps that are available, and then you also have these layers you can add. So right here, this is just an overlay layer that shows information, so that's meant to go on top of another map. So this, let me show you how this can be used. So I'm going to pick Big Maps imagery right here, and then this, actually, you know what I'm going to pick is a layer that's just world terrain. You see right here, I've got a map that's just world terrain. It doesn't have any labels. And then I'm going to say I want to add another imagery layer. And then my other imagery layer right here, what I'm going to add is now just the world administrative overlay like this. So now, once I have this, I can then control the opacity. You see how I can make it more opaque or more transparent. So that's how I can have different layers show up on a map. Or if I leave that one on, like this, I can say I want to use, for example, a map of counties of the U.S. So these are actual tiles. They're server-side tiles that are overlaid on top of another map. And you can see here, as I zoom in, I can see all of my counties, but it's just the shape files for them. Maybe I want to use instead population change layer. So Esri has all of these different map overlays that are available. Some are public data. Others are actually paid services, and we have CloudMade also that has a great selection of maps available. So the key is that with Esri, you can either use public tiles that are available, and we have a whole bunch of the sample here, but if you have your own ArcGIS server, or if you have an ArcGIS online account, then you can add those tile layers directly in our controls. So Esri developers today use the actual Esri controls. They're good controls, but they don't have all the same capabilities as ours. So that's why we've provided this new way of doing things. So I'm going to go back to Big Maps, for example, here. Put this layer here. I go to Big Maps. Okay. Some of the other features that are available, because time is running out, so I'm going to try to wrap this up quick. You can say I want to add all the countries on top. So now I've got all these shape files that are showing up on top here where I can hover over each one of those shape files. And then I can even control the shape size resolution. So if I want to eliminate shapes that are too small, or if I want to make the details a little more coarse. So our shape files will automatically adjust the resolution as you zoom in, but if you want to have manual control over those shape files, you can see here you can make all the edges a little more coarse if you have a very, very high number of shape files. And you can also change the fill color transparency on this. Another cool feature, for example, is using airline traffic. So I'm going to add airline traffic data right here. I'm going to zoom into the United States. And then if I toggle the motion framework, you can actually see animated data on a map showing airplanes using a scatter series, which is symbol data on a map that shows flights. You can actually hover over the flights and see tooltips right here. And this is still a live map, so I can zoom in. And then there's a proportional series that shows airports where the circle is going to be bigger if there's more traffic coming in and out. So of course, Los Angeles is going to be bigger. Denver is going to be bigger. Minneapolis, Chicago, of course, one of the main hubs. You can see them right here. So this shows the usage of our motion framework while paired with geographic data so that everything gets animated for really, really powerful visualizations. You just can't do this on a report. There's a lot more here. The last one I'm going to show you quickly is, for example, the high-density scatter series using geographic data. If I go to Australia right here, and you see here what I have is a map of all the places in Australia. There's over, if I remember correctly, there's over 500,000 points shown on a map right now. You can see here, as I zoom in, as I hover, every single point is being shown with a tooltip, and then you can zoom in, and you can see all of those different locations. So, of course, Sydney has a lot more locations. As I zoom out, you'll notice the density is going to go red to show you that there's a high density of points here. They're all overlapping, so this is a way where you can change it. For example, if I change the density scale right here, change the threshold, and then more parts of the map are going to turn red because you're changing the density value scale. Or you can say, I want to use a different color. I want to use something more like purple for the density value scale. So it goes from purple to blue. And as I zoom in, the density gets lower because now it's more zoomed in, and then it becomes more like blue little points. So this is the high-density scatter series, geographic scatter series on the map. This is all available in our GeoMap browser. You can also add things like precipitation maps, for example. Right here we have scatter data. So it's a very powerful browser. It gives you advanced capabilities. You can use it to get started with your apps. And it also shows you how our Geographic Map Browser control, our Geographic Map control works. So finally, let me go back to my deck here. The last thing is we have some new radial gauges we're introducing. There's already a radial gauge available in Silverlight and WPF today. The feedback we got from customers, though, was that, hey, you know what? It's very complicated because you have to configure everything. You can even provide vector data for the needles and things like that. People wanted something that was easier to get started with. And at the same time, we're providing the same radial gauges on iOS, on jQuery, so you get a uniform look and feel. So the current radial gauge is still available today, but we're introducing this CTP, and you can play with it. It gets you up and running very fast. It still gives you a lot of configuration options. Each gauge supports only one needle, but let's say you want to create multiple needles. You could just add a second gauge on top with only a needle, with no tick marks, nothing, and then control that needle separately. And as long as they're lined up, you won't be able to tell the difference. And it's much easier to get up and running very fast with this. So you can expect that in 13.2 that the current radial gauge will be deprecated in favor of this new radial gauge right here. So play with it. Let us know your feedback, because I would love to know from all of our customers out there that are already using the radial gauge today, how do they use it? Do they like it? Do they like the new one? Would they be willing to move over to the new one? This new one, by the way, is not API compatible with the old one. So even though it has the same name, it's in a different namespace, and we actually designed a whole new gauge. So it doesn't have the same API. The other one was very complicated, very advanced, too many fringe scenarios, but the basic scenarios were too complicated. So we've simplified the API but that means that you have to redesign your gauges today, but you'll be up and running in no time. So feel free to email me, activenick at Infragistics.com, to give me feedback about the radial gauges, and let me know if you like them. So that's about it for today. We're going to switch over to the Q&A section of this webinar. So we've seen a lot of line of business controls with menu, syntax editor, Gantt, pivot grid, WPF ribbon, and the new rich text editor is coming soon. And on the DV side of things, we got new features in the data chart, the pie chart, we have the new donut chart, new tooltips in the tree map, a lot of goodness in the geographic map, and a CTP of radial gauges. This is all available now, okay? So you can go to infragistics.com/products/WPF or Silverlight/downloads, and you can download an evaluation version today. If you're already a subscriber from at least our 12.2 release, if you've renewed our 12.2 release, then you already get the 13.1 release today. And so that means you can go and download this directly into your account. The key's been added, and all of these things are available. So that's it for me and for Brian. These are our contact info. I invite you to engage with us on Twitter. You can send us feedback if you have questions. If you need technical support, please still go to support, okay? Brian and I are here to get feedback about the product. So if you have problems, issues, technical things that you want support to help you with, please use the proper support channel, whether it's tech support, the forums. This is the best way because Brian and I can be bottlenecks, and we're not here for support. We get much better people to support you. But if you have feedback about the product, questions about directions, roadmaps, wishes, things you'd like to see in the product, then you can post them in the forums, but you can also contact Brian and I directly via email or on Twitter, and I invite you also to read our blogs. So we're pretty much out of time, but we're nonetheless going to take a few minutes to answer some questions here, as I'm sure there are some questions that popped open during this time. So let me look at some of the Q&A here. I know Brian has already answered some of this. So Nick sounds a little muffled compared to Brian. Okay, hopefully you guys were able to follow properly. I apologize for that. Is the mapping control more performant than the native map control provided by Microsoft Big Maps control for Silverlight? Yes, I can guarantee you that you will have a much, much better performance with our mapping control compared to the Microsoft Big Maps Silverlight control. Sadly, the Silverlight control at Microsoft, well, from what I heard, it's no longer being maintained. It's still based on version 6.3, if I remember correctly. It was never updated to Big Map 7, so you're going to get a much better experience with ours. How many objects can the map handle? We have close to 12,000 map objects using the Silverlight control. It depends on what your map objects are. So is it push pins? Is it markers? So if you simply show them as markers, then 12,000 points is nothing. It's going to be fine. If it's actual shape controls or shape files and everything, then of course performance might degrade a little bit there, but you have control over resolution and things like that. We do not support Big Map's Street View yet, unfortunately. That's a feature that was just in a Silverlight map control. It's not something that Microsoft has easily exposed as an API. We are in talks with them, however, so if more customers request a Street View, we'll try to integrate it directly inside of our control. I assume the geographic map is for actual mapping of geographical areas. Could I use the map to map a warehouse and plan picking routes for pulling inventory? So we have another older map control called the XAML map control. The XAML map, unfortunately, is going to get retired. It was more of an all-purpose map that was trying to do everything. We have ways of creating what we would basically call kind of an area map, warehouse map, or a seat map, or a floor plan, or something like this. You could do it using shape files. So we're going to try to release over the rest of the year more samples on how to use the geographic map for non-geographic data. But it definitely was designed primarily for geographic mapping. But there are ways that you could use it also if you have your own shape files that you load on it. We have a XAML data grid feature here. Question, I think Brian has already answered it right here. Brian, if you want to jump in and answer some questions via audio, that's all good. I've covered all the map questions, so we can take another minute so you can go through the audio and answer some of those questions.
Yeah, so we got a couple of questions regarding the XAML Gantt control. Both of them are related to data. Specifically, how well does the Gantt control handle Primavera P6 data? And Our XAML Gantt control allows you to map any data source, any structure that you have, custom structure, to the structure that the XAML Gantt expects. So it doesn't matter where your data is coming from on the XAML Gantt. You can map it to the properties that the Gantt is expecting and load your management data, your project scheduling data. For the rich text editor, I was asked if we were going to handle PDF documents. The rich text editor will handle exporting to PDF, but currently there's no plans to actually edit PDF documents. If that's what the question was pertaining to, there will be no editing of PDF, but we will be exporting the content to PDF. We had a question about how our Gantt control compares to the Radial Gauges Gantt control. I haven't done a side-by-side comparison with the Radial Gauges. Our XAML Gantt is relatively new to the market, and we have a great list of features that we plan on implementing in the near future. So if you have any specific ideas or specific features that you think that we should definitely have that Radial Gauges does, please let me know. Ping me on Twitter, email me directly, and let's get a conversation going. Another question we had was, we all know how great the filtering works on XAML Data Grid. What would be an easy way to switch between a grid tabular view to other charts or maps where the data visualized is driven from the filtered grid? So let's say we have the grid and then some buttons on the right to switch to 3 different chart or map views. Well, as with most answers with development type questions, it really depends, right? It depends on the structure of your application, your navigation of your app, the layout, what you want to achieve. Maybe you have a grid on the left-hand side that's static, that's always there, and maybe you use our tiles manager to have all your different data visualization controls within the tile manager that people can bring into view and bring out of view, or maybe you're navigating to completely separate views altogether. It just really depends, and if you're using frameworks like Prism, and you're bringing in other architectural complexities, then that will affect how you will lay out that type of scenario.
So, Brian, regarding this question here from Lee about the different views from the grid and using filters, I actually like this idea. We've heard about this before as well. So one thing that I think we can probably do is, over the next few months, we can try to maybe publish another sample, or maybe that could be even the topic of a blog post, because I think it's a common scenario where people will not have just one view for their information. They're going to use our grids because, yes, our grids are very powerful, and the filtering is also very powerful. And I can definitely see a scenario where people would want to use a dynamic view of that grid and then have that reflected so that it affects data on the chart, the data on the map. So I love the idea, Lee. I'll take that back to the team and our evangelists, and I'll see about maybe publishing a sample in the future, or maybe either as a blog post. I can't promise any dates yet, but definitely that's a scenario I would love to see as a sample, because I know that our controls would shine here.
Yeah, and I do know that our pivot grid does have a sample of it integrating directly with our data chart. So as you drill down into the pivot grid, it will actually modify and show the different data points on our data chart that will be right beneath it. Do you know the sample?
Yeah, because we have the OLAP access support as well in data chart, so that's why they work well together.
Yeah.
So, okay, and somebody asked about the recording. So yes, we will have a recording posted. So we have a video section on our website where it's going to be available. We're going to put it on our YouTube channel. So if you search for Infragistics in our YouTube channel, on YouTube, you're going to find it. We'll have it within a few days. And I know it's going to be on at least one of our blogs. So either my blog is redirected directly to the Infragistics community from activenig.net, or it could be also on Brian's blog. So either one or the other. It's going to show up there. So yes, you will be able to see the full video recording for this. So I think that brings the webinar to an end. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I want to invite you to go and download the controls, try the new version. Let us know what you love, what else is missing, what do you want to see, if you like the new features, and keep the feedback coming. Interact with us on the forums. Send us more questions also on Twitter, at Brian Lagunas and at ActiveNick. You can also follow at Infragistics on Twitter. And for those that are also interested in iOS development, I'm actually doing a webinar in 50 minutes about Nucleus, which are our native iOS controls that allow you to build iOS applications using either Objective-C and Xcode, but also using C# and Xamarin.iOS. So I hope to see many of you there. It's a free webinar. You can still register for it. So the same email that you got regarding this webinar should also contain information about the Nucleus webinar in